So here's a phrase you've probably said to yourself in the last 6 months. I'm doing everything right. You know, everything the experts tell you, every best practice, every recommended setup, the Meta playbook, the Google playbook, the ads agency playbook, and it's not working. ROAS is marginal, or maybe it looks fine on paper, but the bank account doesn't quite match up with what your dashboard's telling you. Or maybe every time you try and scale the budget, the whole thing just falls apart. Or maybe you've been, burned through 3 agencies in 2 years and each one promised something different and none of them actually moved the needle. If any of that sounds like the last few quarters in your business, this episode is for you because I'm about to tell you why doing everything right, in inverted commas, is, in your specific case as a premium brand owner, is exactly what's killing ROAS and, your ability to actually scale. And in this episode, I'm going to walk you through 3 problems that are stacked on top of each other in premium e-commerce right now. 3 structural problems that most premium brand founders are caught inside all at once without actually realizing it. Because each one looks on the surface like a tactical problem that you can fix with a tactical answer, but they're not. They're systemic issues, and the only way out is through it. I'm Kath Langman, your host here at the Brand Marketing Show, and I'm excited for this episode, so let's get into it. And I want to start with the platform itself, because this is the foundation everything else sits on, and once you see it, you probably can't unsee it. Meta and Google, the 2 platforms where most e-commerce ad spend lives, weren't actually built, or aren't currently anyway, for premium brands. They're built for mass market brands. And I'm talking about the optimization algorithms, the campaign structures, the bidding logic, the audience finding tools. Every bit of it is engineered around mass market volume. Lowest cost per click, cheapest possible acquisition, highest cost per acquisition that most brands can stomach. The platform's commercial incentive is to keep the broadcast or keep the broadest possible advertiser base spending, which means, they optimize for what works for the average brand, selling the average kind of product to the average kind of buyers. It's the lowest common denominator situation. But as a premium brand, your customer isn't average. She's not buying on price. She's not going to be the cheapest cost per acquisition target on the platform. In fact, she'll be one of the most expensive buyers on the platform to reach through that kind of generic campaign optimization, because she's not the kind of customer that these algorithms have been trained to find. And here's a bit that, I really want you to sit with for a moment, because the obvious reaction to what I just said is fine, but, I'd actually love a cheaper cost per acquisition. Thanks very much, Catherine. Of course you would, except your premium buyer, the customer your brand is built for, is what we call a rusted on customer. She buys once and she buys again. She buys for her friends. She buys for her sister's birthday. She tells the people in her circle about you, because recommending good brands is part of who she is. Her lifetime value over 2 or 3 years can easily be 3, 5, 10 times that of her first transaction. And every advocate she sends your way arrives pre-warmed and pre-trusted at 0 acquisition cost to you. The cheapest acquisition is a different animal entirely. The cheapest acquisition is what we'd politely call a promiscuous buyer. She bought on a deal. She bought because the price hit a number she'd been waiting for. She's not likely to be loyal to any brand, but she's loyal to, whoever's offering the best deal or the best price at the moment that she's ready to buy. The next time she's in the market, she's probably going to buy from whoever's cheapest on that day, which statistically isn't likely to be you. So when Meta optimizes for the cheapest option, in terms of acquiring a new customer, it's not finding you the wrong customer in some abstract brand sense. It's finding you the customer who will buy once, probably never come back, probably never going to refer a friend, and probably never likely to become that loyal brand advocate. And then that customer is going to drop out of your customer base entirely, while your repeat and referral economics quietly hollow out underneath you. Meta doesn't see any of this. The platform sees that first transaction. It's not seeing your repeat purchase rate, your referral rate, your true customer lifetime value, your advocate to buyer ratio. So it confidently optimizes for the metric it can see and confidently delivers you the customer you least want more of. Let me explain a little bit more of what I mean here. Your customer behavior, the pattern of her decision making, her purchase decision making as a premium, the considered buyer of premium brands is fundamentally different from a mass market buyer. She's going to take longer to convert. She doesn't make impulse purchases on first ad exposure. She'll see your ad, probably leave the platform, Google your brand, check other platforms like TikTok for genuine reviews. Probably going to, these days more and more ask ChatGPT whether your stuff is worth it. Look at 3 or 4 product pages on your site. Probably definitely going to look at your about page too, by the way. She's probably going to leave again, come back a few days later. She's likely to see the ad several times before she clicks and clicks, she's likely to click multiple times before she buys. She's likely to consume content from your emails and wherever else she can get her hands on it. And to her, that's just normal. That's how she shops. She's a considered buyer, making a considered purchase, often at a price point where she'd be silly not to take her time. To the algorithm, every single one of those behaviors looks like noise, like inefficiency, a signal to not bother, because Meta and Google's optimization systems are built to reward fast, frictionless conversion. And so they're going to be rewarding the buyer who sees one ad, clicks immediately, and converts on that first session. That's the buyer the platform is engineered to make, to find more of. And here's where it can get a little bit uncomfortable, the bit most premium founders haven't quite worked out yet. Manually built, we used to be able to use manually built kind of lookalike audiences of your best customers, but they're not really what experts are recommending anymore. We've very much moved on from that. And what Meta uses now by default is what they call their Advantage Plus audience. And how it works is you connect your customer list, you feed in your warm audience, like your past purchases or your abandoned carts or your engaged followers and, people who've been really spending time on your website, whatever you have that set up as. And, all of that information is in your ad account settings. Meta treats those as audience suggestions, as a starting hint. Then the algorithm expands outward from that hint to find more people it thinks will convert, which sounds smart. And, in many ways it is. But here's the bit that nobody says out loud. The algorithm is taking your converters as the seed and then expanding toward whoever it can acquire cheapest from a pool that resembles them, which in the scenario described before is the fast converting low consideration buyer that the platform has already been trained to send you. So the expansion is pulling away from your ideal customer, not toward her. And, if you're using the sales campaign type or the lead campaign as well as campaign types or objectives, you can't fully turn that expansion off. It is the default behavior of the whole system now. So you don't get to tell Meta, no thanks, stick with the audience I gave you. The algorithm is going to go looking beyond your seed because Meta has decided that's better for you. Better, of course, by Meta's definition, which means cheaper. And so the system compounds on its own mistake automatically and quietly and continuously. The algorithm finds you those cheap buyers, and those cheap buyers feed back into your customer list and your warm audiences, and those audiences then become the seed for Meta's next round of expansion. And, Meta then finds you more cheap buyers. The pool gets steadily less aligned with your actual ideal customer over time, not more. And so you're paying Meta to find you the worst version of your customer and then handing those people back to Meta as the template for who to find next. It's like that vicious cycle. So when you run the standard campaign setup that every ads agency rolls out, broad targeting, dynamic creative, optimized for purchase event, lowest cost bidding, you're literally telling the platform to find you that promiscuous customer, not your customer, but the cheapest one. That's why things like ROAS deteriorate the moment you try to scale. It's why creative testing never quite cracks it. And it's why ad accounts that look fine on paper feel like they're slowly bleeding out in your bank account. So it's not likely that it's your creative. It's not likely that it's your targeting. It's really a structural issue. So problem one is the platform itself. Let's talk about problem two. And this is the one that might make a few people a bit pissed off. So brace yourself. I'm going to be kind. If you've listened to this podcast for a while, you know I'm always kind when I deliver criticism. But the expert advice you've been following is in many cases making things worse. So I do want to be careful here because I'm definitely not saying every podcast, every course, every agency, every, LinkedIn article is wrong. Certainly not saying that, but I am saying that almost all of the tactical Meta and Google advice currently in circulation in e-commerce circles is built on the same mass market assumptions as the platforms themselves. So when you, as a premium brand, follow that advice rigorously, you're not just failing to fix the problem, you're going to be making it worse because you are training the platform more aggressively to do the wrong thing for your brand. Let me give you 4 examples here. The first one is, the advice would be trust the algorithm, set broad audiences and let Meta use your creative to figure out who your customer is, which is really great advice for a mass market brand. Meta literally has more data than any human targeter could possibly even dream of synthesizing. A high volume brand with a really wide customer base benefits from getting out of the algorithm's way and just letting it do its work. But for a premium brand, it's exactly the wrong move because the algorithm's idea of who to find is biased, structurally, mathematically biased towards that cheapest buyer. The promiscuous kind of customer. By telling Meta to figure it out, you're handing it complete permission to optimize for the customer who's least valuable to your brand. Example 2 is optimize for purchases. That's the highest intent event, always optimize for the conversion you actually want. Again, fine advice for a mass market brand with high transaction volume. The algorithm needs roughly 50 conversions a week per ad set to exit the learning phase, and high volume brands hit that easily. A premium brand at the higher price point, lower volume, longer consideration window almost never hits it. So your campaigns sit in learning phase indefinitely. The algorithm ends up having to guess at who to find, and the data you give it is so thin and so skewed towards the fast converters that you end up, yes, getting more of those cheap buyers and missing your premium buyer entirely. Example 3 of the advice that's pretty standard. Aggressive creative testing. Test loads and loads of creative, cut the losers fast, always be iterating. And I really want you to think about this one. Aggressive creative testing is going to destroy the algorithm's ability to learn what works for the considered buyer of a premium brand. Premium creatives often have lower, or premium brand creatives, they often have lower click-through rates than mass market creative because the considered buyers don't just click impulsively. They are going to sit and think about, any kind of content that they see. They might save it. They are likely to come back to it. They're going to do that verification searching elsewhere. They'll Google the brand instead of clicking the ad. By the metrics most agencies use to judge creative, premium creative looks like it's underperforming and it gets killed before it has the chance to build the audience pool that actually will convert for you. And then example 4 of the kind of standard playbook of advice, just spend more. The algorithm needs more data, so push the budget up. Spending more on a poorly optimized event, which most premium accounts are running, just gives the algorithm more fuel to do the wrong thing more efficiently. You're not buying better outcomes, you're buying fast about bad outcomes. And if you notice the pattern, every one of those pieces of advice is good advice, but for a different kind of brand. The expert advice isn't wrong in the abstract. It's just wrong for you specifically because it was built for a customer who isn't yours. And this is why so many founders of premium brands feel like they must be doing something wrong, but they're not. They're doing exactly what they were told by the experts and by the platforms. It's just that the advice was never built for them in the first place. Now we're going to come into problem number 3. So there were 3 problems that are contributing to this outcome, this dismal outcome. And so this is the 3rd one. And it's probably the one that's going to be hardest to talk about because we're not talking about the platform anymore. We're talking about we're not talking about the advice either here. We're talking about the response, the human response. And, what we as founders of our brands do when we realize that our ads aren't working. And I'll say up front, I'm not judging this. I've watched these patterns in operators I deeply respect in brands that I would back in a heartbeat. And I do, I buy from many of them. These responses are completely human and they're what almost everyone does, but they are traps. It's like the whole canary in the coal mine scenario, and they keep founders stuck in exactly the same situation they're trying to escape. And there are 2 patterns I see most often. And the first pattern is the silver bullet chase. This is the founder who, when one tactic doesn't work, immediately moves to a different tactic. It could be a new ad format, it could be a new agency, a new course, a new funnel, a new platform. I mean, let's try TikTok ads or Pinterest. Let's try UGC creator strategies. Let's pivot to email-led growth. Let's bring on an influencer. I mean, each move feels productive and it keeps you really busy and creative and it feels like progress. And each move comes with a fresh wave of hope. This one might be the answer. But here's the trap. None of those moves actually stay in place long enough to know whether they would have actually worked for the type of considered buyer that a premium brand is made for. The algorithm needs time to learn. New audiences need time to warm. Content strategies need time to compound. And the founder who chops and changes every 6 weeks without realizing is preventing every approach from ever reaching the point where it could have produced results. So she's not an undisciplined founder. She's not impatient in any pejorative sense. She's actually trying to solve a real problem, and the marketing industry keeps handing her new possible solutions. So when something doesn't work, she moves on. Staying with something that it feels like and on paper says that it's not working feels like the wrong choice, right? It feels like the responsible thing to move on, and it feels like the kind of decision a leader would make. But it isn't. It's actually the opposite of leadership. Leadership in this situation looks like staying with the structural work long enough for it to actually work. That's an unglamorous answer almost nobody really wants to receive. The second pattern of many founders is a little bit more sophisticated, and I do see it more in operators who've been around the block a few times, who've been in business for longer. So these are founders who've already lived through that silver bullet phase and know it doesn't work. It's the founder who's looking for an expert who can produce different outcomes without requiring a different approach, because she's invested so much already in her current approach. So she's not chopping and changing tactics anymore, but she's still hoping there's an answer somewhere. She's hoping that if she just finds the right agency or just finds the right media buyer, the right marketing strategist, the right consultant, that person will be able to make her existing setup work harder. better creative within this existing structure, better targeting within the existing structure, better optimization within the existing structure. She doesn't want to do the structural work itself because she knows the structural work is going to be more expensive and slower and disruptive. It's going to require rebuilding her organic content strategy, rebuilding her product pages, rebuilding her audience architecture, rebuilding her customer intelligence, rebuilding the relationship between paid and organic, probably reconsidering pricing, positioning, the whole ecosystem. And she doesn't feel like she has time for that. She doesn't feel like she has the budget for that. She really wants someone to come in and make the existing thing work. But there isn't anyone. There genuinely isn't, because the existing thing is structurally misaligned with what her premium customer requires. And no amount of talent applied within the wrong structure is going to produce a different result. And I've had to have this conversation so many times with founders. It's never a really easy one, I can tell you, because the founder is hoping that I'll tell her there's a tactical fix. And I keep telling her that there isn't, and she keeps looking for someone who will tell her there is. And sometimes she will find that person, and it's usually because that person hasn't realized yet that they can't deliver on the promise. And then 6 months later, she's back and we have the same conversation. And this time she's ready because she finally realizes you can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different outcome. Here's the honest truth about both those patterns of behavior. The silver bullet chase and the outcome without approach trap are the same response in different costumes. Both are attempts to avoid the structural work the situation actually requires. Both keep the founder in motion without making her face the actual question, which is whether she's willing to build the system that her considered customer requires. Whew. So if everything I have said so far is true, and in my experience, it is, but you should absolutely test it against your own experience, what does it actually look like to fix this? And I will give you my honest version. Premium brands absolutely scale profitably on Meta and Google. We do it for our clients every day and in our own businesses. The economics work, the ROAS holds its scale, the CPA stays in budget, and the growth compounds. But it requires the opposite of the default playbook, and it requires the opposite of that silver bullet response. What it actually takes is a system, not a tactic, but a growth system designed around how that considered premium buyer actually makes purchase decisions. And here's what that system looks like at a high level. It starts with custom audience architecture built around the actual behavior of your premium customer, not the algorithm's default audiences and not generic lookalikes of whoever has bought lately. That means real first-party customer intelligence. It means really knowing who your real customer is, her values, her hesitations, her decision-making process at a level of detail that lets you build audiences and creatives the platform's algorithm couldn't have figured out for you. It means bidding and optimization logic around lifetime value, not cheapest possible acquisition. Sometimes that means optimizing for events the platform doesn't recommend optimizing for. Sometimes it means consciously higher CPAs in exchange for substantially higher lifetime values, which is invisible to the platform, but very obvious to your accountant. It means creative built specifically for premium buyer psychology, which usually looks slower, more considered, more genuinely useful, less hooky and pushy than the standard playbook will tell you to make. Creative that earns the longer view through and the validation search rather than chasing the impulsive click. It means an organic trust infrastructure feeding the paid layer. The reason your considered buyer takes longer to convert is because she's checking you out everywhere else first. If your brand has no AI citations, no genuine social search presence, no review depth, no media credibility, the validation search comes back empty and the purchase won't go ahead. So, this is where the whole search everywhere optimization becomes part of this. And so is your organic content strategy, and so is your PR, and so is your community. It means product pages built to convert that considered buyer once she finally arrives ready to buy. Not pages designed to look beautiful, but pages designed to convert someone who's spent 2 weeks deciding whether to buy from you and has arrived with a list of specific objections that need to be answered. And it means a single strategic mind, making sure that all of these various layers are connected and pulling your brand in the same direction. Not a media buyer optimizing in isolation or a silo against generic platform metrics. Not a content creator producing brand feed content that's disconnected from the paid strategy. Not a website designer making aesthetic decisions disconnected from the conversion job, but a strategist whose actual job is to make sure the whole system is working together. That's the real work, and that's what scales. And it is the work almost nobody wants to do because in the short term, it's slower and more expensive and less satisfying than the silver bullet would be if that silver bullet existed. It doesn't, of course, but on the other side of the effort is a growth system that produces the highest ROI over time. Now, here's where I want to land this episode. The founders who break through aren't the ones who found a better tactic. They're the ones who finally stopped looking for one. They're the ones who said, okay, the structural work is the work. I'm done chasing fixes. I'm going to build the system. If you've recognized yourself anywhere in this episode, whether it's in the platform problem or the expert advice problem or the silver bullet pattern or the outcome without approach trap, I want you to take one thing from it. It's not your fault. The platforms weren't built for you. The advice wasn't built for you. The instinct to keep moving when something isn't working is totally human and reasonable. None of that means that you're a bad operator. In fact, most of the operators I respect have lived through every one of those patterns at some point. But if you're ready to stop and look honestly at where your situation or what your situation actually requires, that's the conversation worth having. You're welcome to have it with me. That's why we offer a growth strategy session where we would sit down, we would look at your specific business, your specific customer, your specific platform setup, and really your specific everything. And we would, I'm happy to tell you the truth about what your situation requires and what, not what the playbook says. I'm not going to give you that kind of generic playbook advice, and I'm not going to just pander to your ego to make you feel better. But I'm happy to share what it would actually take to build what your customer requires and to build towards the vision that you have for your business. If you would like to have that conversation with me, you can just head to productpreneurmarketing.com to schedule that in with me. Or you can head to the show notes for this episode and you'll find the link there. That is it for today's episode, though. As always, I'm Kath Langman. This has been the Brand Marketing Show, and I look forward to being in your ears again this time next week. Bye for now.